Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome to Hugo Girl Novella-vember number 2. It's a week later. We're all wearing different shirts.
That's right.
Just kidding. We're coming to you from the living room of Lori and Kevin.
In the same shirts we wore last week.
Yep.
Or 5 minutes ago when we finished number 1.
That's true. Today we're going to discuss a novella by James Tiptree Jr., a.k.a. Alice Sheldon, called Houston, Houston, Do You Read?
What's your name?
I'm Haley.
I'm Amy.
And I'm Lori.
Yeah. All right. So this book won a Nebula Award for Best Novella in 1976 and a Hugo Award for Best Novella in 1977. Let me summarize the plot for you. 3 astronauts out traveling in the solar system experience disturbance from a solar flare and attempt to contact ground control on Houston. Hence the title. They get no response but start receiving a signal from mysterious women, which puzzles them. Their ship, the Sunbird, the men's ship, needs help, and they end up doing a spacewalk rescue mission, and they go into the women's spaceship. It turns out they weren't lost, but the American astronauts had actually time traveled for 3 centuries, which gives me strong Planet of the Apes vibes. On board the ship, they learn more about the new Earth, what's happened since they, disappeared. An epidemic caused widespread infertility and eventually the extinction of men and the Y chromosome. The women on board are actually all clones. They drug the men to reveal their true natures and learn these time travelers have deep desires that are antithetical to the new women-based culture that has developed on Earth. It's revealed that the men were never going to get to visit the new Earth. The women were just performing an experiment on them and to collect semen samples, and they do not live. And that is a high-level overview. It was strangely complicated when I started writing it.
I think that's a pretty good sum up. Yeah. Man goes to space, comes back, only women. Women say no.
I didn't know that they were not gonna... They're gonna kill them all on the ship or something?
Well, I don't know if they tell us, really.
It's ambiguous, I think, in the text itself, but every review and summary of it
seems to think they're gonna die.
Yeah.
Huh. I always figured they caged them up somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it does seem like it would make sense to save the genetic material because there's none.
They're going to use them for reproduction like men have done to women for time immemorial.
Yeah. And so you might be asking yourself, why not just keep living that clone life? And I think, they stop having genetic viability, I think, at a certain point. It's good to have different things worked into your genetic sequence.
I think that's right.
Okay, goodies from Goodreads. Rachel on Goodreads says, must read for sci-fi lovers, especially women sci-fi lovers. Warning, ending is PG-15. If you have read this book,
PG-15.
I don't want my high schooler reading the very, very graphic sexual assault scene. So I thought that was a ridiculous Goodread review.
PG-15 isn't a real rating.
Well, also it's not a real rating either, but that's like saying you should watch...
This is at least PG-20.
That's like saying that Saving Private Ryan is like PG-11. Like, no.
I don't know. I mean, I read Prince of Tides in 11th grade.
I read V.C. Andrews.
I was an addict. Yeah.
I think PG-15 is fine, but it's not real.
Yeah. Whew, it was a lot for me. I was like, whew, I don't know about that.
McKinley on Goodreads gave it 2 stars and said, gender issues. That's the whole review.
All right. Bad Horse on Goodreads rated it 1 star.
Bad Horse.
And I noted that it has, out of all of its reviews and ratings on Goodreads, it has only 14 1-star ratings and only 2 1-star reviews.
Yes.
Bad Horse said, this story is vile hate speech, which claims that all men are rapists who can't stop themselves from raping women the moment they meet them, and the world is better off without them. It's obscene that it won the Hugo and the Nebula. Obscene that Alice Sheldon published it pretending to be a man.
Obscene.
And even more obscene that the Tiptree Award for fiction about gender is named after such a vicious sexist.
Well, not anymore.
Yeah.
So you win this round.
Wait till they find out what's worse than being a potential sexist.
Has he heard
potential
of murder?
Yeah, so I figure, when should we talk about? Because I think it's
also that's patently not true. 2 of the men on that boat did not rape anybody.
That's true. And
And that definitely wasn't the minute they saw them either.
I was going to say, there was several maybe weeks or months.
First.
Yeah.
Also, not that it's fine, but the man was extremely drugged, and they were trying to collect a sperm sample.
Here, what do you do with no frontal lobe?
I don't know what to do with that scene.
Yeah.
I don't either.
Yeah, so it is, before we talk more about general things, it's, so James Tiptree was a woman named Alice Sheldon who had a fascinating life, and her Wikipedia is a wild ride.
It is a wild ride.
I
I
say that-
recommended
yeah.
reading it top to bottom.
Top to bottom, you have to finish
And
it.
apparently she has, a couple people recommended her formal biography, and that it is obviously a wilder ride.
Yeah, I might have to check that
It's
out.
the Moby Dick version of her Wikipedia.
Yes, yes. So the idea to use a pseudonym to publish under a male in a very male-dominated genre makes sense.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
Pseudonyms are as old as writing.
That's
Come
true.
on.
We don't even think that Homer might have been lots of people. That,
What was his last name?
he's like Cher.
Cher has a last name, or at least used to.
That's true. That's true.
And she had that CIA career to protect.
Even Madonna has a last name.
Saucony. Yeah,
Beyonce has a last name. Come on.
that's true.
Beyonce has that last name. So it's here.
It's K-N-O-W-L-E.
Okay.
Oh wait. As I was reading the Wikipedia plot summary, which is always fun to do because some people are more eloquent or less eloquent, they refer to the man who performs a sexual assault as over amorous.
Oh, that's
That's my misogynist moment. It's early, guys. I'm sorry.
that's like calling rape sex.
Yeah, I was just like, the whole. Did you read the short story? Like,
That's not what it is.
he's just a little over loving.
He's just excited.
I hated
Can't
that
help
part.
himself. Boys
So-
will be boys. You know how it goes.
Okay, so I mentioned this in the group chat. Lori said she wasn't sure, so I want to talk about solar punk because it's one of my favorite genres, and you can kind of like backwards stick things into it that didn't know what they were at the time.
Backward stick
So
things.
solar punk is the idea in literature and sci-fi in particular, but it's also in movies and video games of like, creating a very positive look of the future at Earth as humanity as a community coming together to use the environment in a sustainable way. So it's very broad. And I think actually, yeah, the definition is a literary, artistic, and activist movement that envisions and works towards actualizing a sustainable future interconnected with a nature and community. So some Kim Stanley Robinson, it kind of gets into like climate fiction. I think a classic example from last year was Becky Chambers' a Psalm for the Wild Belt. It's like this, basically it's the opposite of, there's a sci-fi convention called Grimdark where, like Reading the Road by,
Right.
what's his face? Like it doesn't have to always be like people killing each other. It could be like this cool future that's great and kind of green. So there's a whole complex ecosystem on the women's ship that I thought was fascinating. They've got a goat, there's an iguana, there's grasshoppers, the bathroom isn't a vacuum tube that sucks your urine out or poop that you have to like take out of your butt because of gravity. Like it's a nice greenhouse with like you pee on grass. It's nice. So it's human powered technology that's sustainable in a way that is very, and like a lot of times in human history, there's like the yin and the yang, and like the more women centered side has been associated with nature, and that's what this society seems to have done, which is kind of cool. So,
Yeah. It seems like it's a very small population that's left on Earth, right?
2 million people out of the entire, 8 billion that were probably.
Yeah, and they're all clones, right? So individuals are less than whatever.
Yeah, there's
less
like
than
11,000 distinct phenotypes.
So I was curious
genotypes.
if their oneness with nature had to do more with, it's a natural byproduct of there being fewer people, or if it was a purposeful endeavor. You know what I'm saying?
Probably a little both.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, if you think about so I love a spaceship, but like, especially, 1970s NASA spaceships were about as sterile and mechanical and cold as you can get. Like, so the idea of a goat on a space, like, I don't know how it would work. I don't know where the goat poop would go. I don't know how
He has
gravity.
to pull it out of its
Well,
butt.
also, I was kind of interested in one of the things that happens in The Expanse is the outfitting of this generation ship, right? And they
Generation ships are great.
Yeah, generation ships, which was a running gag at the Hugo Awards, which I thought was pretty funny. But, generation ships, you have families and means of continuing to live and make your own food and regeneration and all that sort of things in these generation ships. I always thought that was really interesting, how we could graft. And Rama was a good example of that, too. Like, Rama is a generation ship. It has like farmlands and all these things in it, which I thought was crazy. I love that.
Well, and
I
there's
love a goat on a spaceship too.
Yeah, and there's also other things like, basically, like some things, like there's, I used to go to a party where they would make, or maybe it was Frisbee. No, it was a house party where they would make margaritas on a bike blender. So there's like lots of like weird mechanical things like this in the ship that aren't, made by an engineer necessarily, but they work. So like something spins where the beds are that keeps like gravity going or something. So.
Does Station 11 count as solar punk?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, interesting.
Like you have people trying to create a society that means something in the future. So
Interesting.
I mean, usually it's more of like there's more of like a sciencey bend, but it doesn't have to. So
Is a world with only one gender a utopia or a dystopia?
I think it depends on
Guess you have to go find out.
Yeah, I guess
depends
so.
on who's reading it, maybe.
Well, and it's like we were talking about in our previous episode that we definitely recorded a week ago and not 20 minutes ago. That's time dilation, guys.
Yeah.
It's like we were talking
Is
about.
now?
Haley, you said, like, what if everyone had the same skin color? Like, we would find other ways to stratify and treat each other badly. I think the same thing.
Yeah.
If you had an all-women society, we would just find other ways to be shitty to each other.
Yeah, we were talking about this. Lori and I very, very briefly were talking about this, how she saw it. You correct me if I get this wrong. This is your reading, not mine. But you had read it as women come out better when they have power than men. Is that accurate?
Wait, what?
The opposite.
Well, I read it
Oh,
as
yeah.
women not being so great when they were the only ones left.
No, that's what I think too, but I just think it is a takeaway. Like, I think you could read it that way. I don't read it that way because I think
Oh, okay.
things seem kind of weird. And they did,
Yeah.
they did, like, many people read it to say that they murdered the three people, the only new three people that they met at the end. I'm not sure that they did, but
Yeah.
I think that is like a way that I would imagine people would read it, because Tiptree, from what I read, was, experimenting with the idea of being able to escape from a world where, like, men are dragging her down and holding her back. And so I think that that's like a valid way to read this. I don't necessarily read it that way because everything is a little bit spooky sounding to me.
Yeah.
But I think it's a way to read it.
That this is an ideal.
That it could be, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's probably what some people take away from it, because, like, that. Well, for example, this person who rated it 1 star on Goodreads and was like, "This is a story about how all men are automatically horrible and bad." And, like, I think at a surface level reading, it does look like that. But I don't think that it's. I don't really. That wasn't my takeaway.
Okay.
Yeah, it's complicated because, like, men are not the problem in society. I mean, like, it's how society gives men powers in certain situations. Like, again, I think she was married to a man. She loved a man dearly. Like, I don't think she hates men. I think it's just the aggressive parts of toxic masculinity. And I read, actually, appeared to be a man's profile picture on a review. He was like, as a man, I was like, this is clearly a take on toxic masculinity, not all masculinity. So
Yeah, I don't think men are inherently bad.
Well, the thing that
They're
I
not
think
born bad.
was the most interesting for me is about the performance of masculinity for other men. That
Yes,
it's very
yes,
clear
yes,
that when
absolutely.
men are performing toxic masculinity, it is for other men. And when men do not stand up against toxic masculinity, it is because they fear reprisal from other men.
Yeah. Yep.
And you really see that when Bud becomes totally unhinged. He starts ranting at the end when he finds out there are no other men, and he's like, "I'm going to be the big dick king of the earth, and, like, every woman is going to be my concubine." And he's like, at first seems like very aroused and excited by that, and then he sort of starts to spiral, because, like, what does it all mean if there are no other men to lord that over? If there are no men who are jealous of you or competing with you, what does all that mean?
Nothing.
So it just becomes so clear that this performance is all for other men. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have what is the main guy's name?
Lorimer.
Lorimer. Oh, yeah. It looks like I had some typos in the PDF that I read. So there are some places where it said Lori Mare. And I was like, oh, it's me.
Was it transcribed by Otter?
Oh, God, maybe. But yeah, you see that with Lorimer on the other end of the spectrum, because he is not a big guy. He's not a tough guy. And he's always sort of just on the outskirts of that boys club looking in and really wanting to be part of it. But then I think he also feels a little bad that he wants to be part of it because he sees that it's dangerous and unhealthy, but he still wants to be part
And
of
they
it.
make fun of him for being soft. And
Yeah.
The depiction of a beta male was fascinating because you don't see that a lot.
Yeah.
And he was, like, sitting there watching something horrible happen, and he's like, doesn't
What do I
like it,
do?
but then he likes it, and then it gets real gross. Like,
Yeah, he was aroused, and he was like, wait, no, this is weird, and
Yeah.
he didn't know what to do. And
Well, another interesting thing about that is that you can't help, like, the shitty, weird things that we think and feel, like
your body's going to do stuff.
the truth serum stuff that they gave them is really terrifying, because I don't want, I mean,
Don't strip away my filters. I do not know what I will say.
all of us have scary things in
Yes.
us. And, like, that's what makes you a person. You make other choices.
Right, you don't act on every thought
Right.
that goes through your head.
every
Right.
time I hang out with kids, and kids haven't learned, like, the layers upon layers to build, to protect, and to be polite. And whenever I hang out with an adult again, I'm like, self-control.
Kids are like these weird amoral, like
They're just basic humans. Yeah.
They're
like,
they're just ego. It's fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're just, they say what they feel and think, and that's got to be freeing, but it's also why they have breakdowns constantly.
unless you're raised in a Southern WASP family, in which case you do not talk about how you feel. Thank you very much.
Well,
No.
I think a lot about how it's unfortunate that we like become people by like bumping into each other and causing harm to other people. Like,
I don't want to cause you harm.
Yeah, like when I'm 6 years old and I hurt somebody's feelings and then I feel bad and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't do that again.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just too bad that we like, that's how we seem to have to learn how to be humans.
It's a hard thing being a human.
This book was really good actually to pair with The Word for World is Forest,
I was
because
thinking about that.
like Lubov is like Lorimer kinda, and Davidson is kind of like Bud. I
Yep.
mean, there are a lot of parallels there.
And they were written pretty close, like the year after each other, I think.
Yeah, definitely like close.
This was, 77.
So both
Oh,
70s.
this was about 5 years later.
Yeah, but like same decade.
about the same time, yeah.
Women dealing with the same shit.
And they were friends.
They were such good friends.
Tiptree and
Oh, were they?
It was so interesting to me to find out that Tiptree had all these close friends in the science fiction and fantasy community through writing letters. So all these people didn't know if she was a man or a woman or believed she was a man. She was good friends with Robert Silverberg.
So
And he didn't know.
And he thought she was a man. And they stayed friends, which I actually thought, to his credit, he was so sure she was a man. He found out she wasn't. And I feel like toxic masculinity would dictate that you have to like stop being friends with
Well,
her.
you pull a Davidson, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not gonna.
Well, number one, she's a girl. Number two, she made you look really dumb. Well, you made you look really dumb, but someone would easily turn that around and be like, you made me look stupid. And toward the end of her life, she had written him a letter about wanting to take her own life and not sure what to do about her husband's life. And, so they remained intimate friends for a long time.
Good for you, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, well, I did also read that she apologized to him, and I thought,
Never mind.
I mean, she may have just apologized. There was nothing that said like he made her apologize
Well, I
or
guess
whatever.
I could
but-
see why you'd feel bad for making these
Sure.
people look foolish.
Sure.
For having these hot takes and never telling them, hey,
Sure.
back off. I'm
Yeah.
actually a woman.
I've never had just an epistolary relationship with somebody, but I feel like I wouldn't have to be like, I'm definitely a woman when I wrote, or definitely a man. So like,
I've
maybe it
had-
didn't come up.
He wasn't like ASL.
I had at least one parasocial relationship with a guy when I was like 14 and we were pen pals. Oh, I fell in
Was he in jail?
love with him. He was not.
I didn't realize this until I read it twice this afternoon. So they inject some of the women's planet with testosterone to make them stronger or bigger to do work, like manual labor or something. So there's a character on the ship that we don't realize. So they think when they arrive that it's a bunch of women and like a young man, and they call him Andy. Turns out her name is actually Kay, but then I realized Andy for androgen.
Yeah, it's like a surname that you get.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I think this book, kind of like, the trans movement was not yet in full force, I imagine, in the 70s, but trans people existed. And I think that's not what she was trying to do, but it was interesting what they were doing with hormones in this book. So.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Agreed.
you segued perfectly into like the last thing in my notes was about there are interesting questions that raised about gender identity in this. And I would also like to read the expanded universe of this because I'd like to know more about that. Like, I wonder, they used male pronouns for Andy when the Sunbird crew came aboard their ship, but did they do that for Andy's safety? Which then is also interesting because people will, in certain situations, they will use the pronouns that maybe the person they're talking to would expect them to use because it's a safety thing. So that's I wonder if that was what was happening here or if in Andy's day-to-day life, Andy would use male pronouns. Who knows? I have so many questions about how this works. And it seems like they have very strong identity ties toward their clone type. Like Judy's talk too much, but like Judy's can also be all different kinds of people. Judy's can be painters and doctors, but they all kind of talk too much. So I thought it was super interesting how identity seems very tied up in which type of clone you are, and no one really talks about gender at all. But I mean, there's got to be interesting things going on.
I was like, if there's only one gender, then there's no genders, right? Or is like gender in this situation is if you're just strong, then
Yeah.
or is it just as much binary as? It is
I mean,
now?
I wonder
Yeah.
if gender identity is an identity or if it's more like I'm an Amy. I'm a, if those are the identities. And like, what if you are an Amy clone, but you're talkative and you feel more like a Judy? I don't know. I just think that there's a lot of room
that's
to
a good
play
point.
with that in this universe.
Yeah.
And I would have loved to have read more about it. This was so short. Like,
It was short. It
Looking
flew
at it,
by.
I was like, are you sure you're a novella? It was very brief.
I think I mentioned this in the group chat, but I'll share it with our listeners too. Like this is the first book I've read for the podcast in a while that like I flew through. Like I was like, I gotta know what happens, man.
I did the same thing. I sat down to just read a couple pages.
Same, yeah.
And the next thing I knew, 2 hours later, I was finishing it.
I was supposed to be working yesterday morning for like the first half hour of the day, and I was like, oh shit, I gotta go to work.
Yeah, it was. It was a page turner.
And it's presented as a mystery because you want to know, like, anytime you're 300 years later, like, I want to know what happened. And then you have this weird society with all women. Also, like, they can't all be gay. Like, not everybody is gay. Like, even if there's only one gender, like, you would.
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Maybe it's like prison. They're just like, I gotta have a wife. I don't know.
I mean,
They made them seem very non-sexual.
Which is interesting.
Maybe sexuality just changes after 300
years?
years of only one gender.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I feel that there will always be a lot of horny people in the world.
That's true.
And you're going to do what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And if you're not ever presented with a man, then how would...
That's a good
like,
point.
what would you... Yeah, I don't know how that would go.
Yeah, and then I think, so then sex becomes completely divorced from reproduction, which is interesting. Which is what, that's what's really benefited women in the last part of the last century is like, you don't, every time you have sex, you don't have to have a baby, which is huge.
And you don't have to have sex to have a baby either.
Yeah, that's true.
Evolutionary change can happen pretty quickly.
If you have lots of money.
That's true.
Then those things can be separated.
Oh, also, I want to bring up, this is like, again, the book Seven Eves, which they base their humanity 5,000 years from now on 7 phenotypes. So this is 11,000.
Oh, yeah, I feel like 11,000 is a lot of genetic diversity.
That's too many.
That's too many.
That's too many.
I hope that we read soon is Where Late the Sweet Bird Sang by Kate Wilhelm, which is a post-apocalyptic story about cloning and how things go awry when the only people are clones of clones of clones and how they kind of slowly, the things that we think of as our humanity are eroded away.
I'm curious how the clones in these books decide to reproduce. Like, who decides that a clone is going to have another clone? Do you decide for yourself? Is someone dictating that for you?
Yeah.
I would love to know what she thought about that.
I think that this book has so much room for stuff about sexuality, about sex, about gender identity, reproduction. I would love to read this novel.
I agree.
That clone stuff, have you seen Multiplicity with Michael Keaton?
I don't
So,
think so.
It's a stupid comedy movie where Michael Keaton is like a scientist or something. Actually, I don't know how the clones come about, but he ends up cloning himself, and the clones clone each other, and they get dumber
as they go along.
So it's just like by clone number 6, he's just like burr, 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 burr. Yeah,
no.
Yeah. But that's what that sounds like. So,
well, these clones lose creativity. They don't necessarily get they can do like mathematical equations and things. No. Oh. I'm sorry. In the Kate Wilhelm book that I think that we should read fairly soon.
That does sound good.
They lose like creativity and problem solving skills and things like that. So I wouldn't say they are necessarily like dumber,
but some of their acute.
Like the individuality. They also lose interest in
Less
sex. They just are.
So they go on Lexapro. I am not good at math.
On that note,
what do you got for feminist favorite? I just like that they seem to have a nice space. So they made a big deal of the fact that like you have a space program with only 2 million people, and I was proud of those ladies.
I liked it when Judy did her fearless spacewalk, and she was just like, "I'm gonna go outside now," and like the guys were like, "We have to go outside, and it's very important." She's just like, "Doop."
Yeah, they were very very much go-getters, although then we find out it was to go get some sperm.
They're like, ooh, go get those mans.
It's too bad that they didn't know that there was an easier way. Like, they didn't have to drug them.
It's not hard. No. What, like it's hard?
You could have just been like, sir, would you? And be like, absolutely. So misogynist moment, there is a pretty horrible, very graphic, several page long sexual assault, which it seems like they may or may not be orchestrating, but again, there's probably a better way to have depicted that, but it was tough to read.
It's strange because she consented in a weird way. Like they entrapped him.
Yeah, they certainly contrived to cause him to ejaculate.
Right.
And even when
from his perspective, though, it was a sexual assault, which is alarming.
It's very interesting. It gives you, again, a lot to think about.
It does.
It gives you a lot to think about consent. And then, it's like they were all in on it because Andy's got a camera. And then Laura Mare is saying to Connie, we've got to stop this. And she's like, don't worry, Judy's like Vita. Judy's very athletic. Judy works out. Like she'll be okay. I was like, this is so strange.
Yeah.
But I think what, makes it so hard to read is the way he's talking to her.
Oh, it's disgusting.
Oh,
yeah. It was
Bud, the way he's talking.
The horrible
to her.
things. And then when he finds out that Andy's gay and like the litany of homophobic slurs, just awful. Like,
or like he assumes that Andy is a lesbian.
Yeah. Which she may not be.
Andy looks masculine and maybe is masculine. I mean, we don't know. There's so much we don't know, but the minute he's like, oh, short hair, no boobs, you like, oh, the stuff he says is
It's horrible, yeah.
It's like if you strip away the thin veneer of socialization on him, it's suddenly he becomes this like monster.
It's automatic.
It was awful.
Yeah, and again, like, not every man has those thoughts. So I think
No.
people that want to criticize this book might conflate that. But, like, this is just one bad man.
Right.
Well, and you have a spectrum of men, too. Like, in these three men, you see three very different reactions and three very different expressions.
Like the captain wanted to make religion out of them all and be their god.
Oh, my God. Oh, and he uses, like, actual Bible verses. And I was
Yeah.
like, that's in the Bible? Ooh.
It's so funny. He's like, all these little girls have just been waiting for me to arrive. Sir, I think you got another thing coming.
I can't remember now why Lorimer ends up being rejected by them.
He's just a little guy, I think.
He's not physically large.
Oh, he's a short king.
And he's a short king, and he is scholarly, I think.
He's a nerd, probably.
He's a thinky guy.
Rejected by the women.
Oh.
Like,
Oh, what do you mean rejected?
Why does he end up? I can't remember. I read this a while ago. Why he ends up? Like why they lump him in with the rest of them?
I think they just...
What do you mean?
So the women basically come to the conclusion that it's not worth having men around because they're too much trouble and they're not very well behaved, and they take their sperm and that's all they want from them.
Oh, I mean, it may have been some of the stuff that he said to Connie when he was under his truth serum, because he
maybe.
said some of that stuff about how he was like thinking about seeing them all being raped and helpless
Oh,
and
that's
stuff. I mean, he
right,
did
yeah.
say those
It's
things.
true.
And also, he presents no... I mean, even if he does nothing horrible, he's not, like, in the +1 column or...
He's sort of been tried and convicted of a thought crime, you know?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is very dystopian.
But yeah, that was a callback to Calicane for me. Like, this idea of, like, seeing people's hidden truths can be horrifying, so... I liked... At one point towards the end, when they're saying why they can't have these men on Earth... This made me laugh out loud. We simply have no facilities for people with your emotional problems.
His favorite.
Obviously, she's talking about Dave and Bud, but like,
Oh,
that's
that's like
pretty
when I was told by a boyfriend one time that it would be a lot easier to talk to me about things if I didn't have so many emotions.
Well, that's probably true. That's true of all of us, you know?
But it's also hard talking to a robot.
If
so.
you could just receive information and be rational.
Just be a robot.
make your body respond to it. Yeah.
Do they have any food? They have feminist food in this? Or feminist food?
They discuss having delicious food, but they don't go into detail, sadly. I would love to know.
They eat the iguanas. One of them says the iguana is not bad.
Tastes like chicken.
Tastes
Yeah.
like chicken.
And then when they shoot the iguana, and she's just like,
Ugh.
yeah. it's
Oh,
gross.
yeah. They reintroduce guns into the
Oh, man.
situation. Yeah.
He shoots the hull of the ship. They have to fix it.
That's the worst idea on Earth.
He's not. Listen, I think that
He's
the
not
past did
housebroken.
not send us our best men. And then Lorimer is like, no, don't use a ballistic weapon inside a spaceship. And he's like, I think I will.
Oh, we didn't do boob talk.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, what's next? What are we on?
One
talk.
time when what's his toes was doing the assault, he just says titties, titties, titties.
didn't he say at one point, where are the boobs? When Lorimer said, Andy's a woman, which is a bit debatable, but I understand what Lorimer was like, don't hit Andy. And then I think he goes, a woman, where are the boobs?
Where are the, you know, boob, woman equals titties. Titties.
No balls. No balls at all.
No balls at all.
No ball banter.
Oh, ball
banter.
Oh, it's been a minute for ball banter.
Lori, was there any soap stuff?
The clone thing.
Yeah.
And theft of sperm is pretty soapy. That has
yeah,
absolutely happened on Days of Our Lives.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Did you like this book?
I did like this book a lot, even though we had talked about, you know, generally 99% of the time I'm against showing graphic rape in a book, but I think it did serve a purpose in this book, and I hate to say that.
And it was a complicated.
Yeah, it wasn't just a sexual
situation,
assault.
yeah.
There's a little bit of layers to it, but that doesn't make it easier for someone who's experienced trauma to read it.
No,
at
and
all.
he was awful.
Yeah, no, I mean it was hard to read.
Yeah.
Even the language without what was physically going on would have been
It's fucked up.
is difficult to read.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. But despite that, Paige Turner, I love. It was a perfect mix of hard sci-fi and soft sci. Like, a lot of women get shit for like, oh, well, most women only write soft sci, but like this one was talking about like mechanical things and like sciencey things with ova. So
I thought she did good job with the science. The when they were like trying to triangulate their trajectories and
Yeah.
get the ships close enough to, and then they had to like cross space. And I thought that all that was, and they had to net them.
That reminded me of The Martian, the movie. Like
Yeah,
when you're
yeah.
watching him trying to get rescued by the ship.
It was cool.
Yeah,
I thought it was good.
It was. I think it'd be a cool movie, actually.
Oh yeah, agreed. Yeah, they could work out some of the
Can
nuance.
we get someone to write the prequel?
I did like it.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I did like it.
I knew you were on the fence.
I was kind of on the fence last night. The more I thought about it today, I like it.
Yeah.
I think it's very effective. A very effective exploration of how people have been conditioned to behave too,
Yeah. No, it's true.
or conditioned to think about things, and then how that can come out of people in different ways.
I think it was such a good book because it wasn't too long. You know, a lot of the books we read suffer from good idea, very bad execution. I think she nailed both. And it was feminist, and it was just really good.
And bonus wiki page.
Oh, yes, please. I don't even think that we can do justice in our abbreviated format this time to talk about her life, but
Go read it.
read it.
But I feel like this is a spoiler and a content warning.
Yeah.
Don't spoil it.
No.
Don't spoil it,
You
Lori.
can't tell people to go read that without it.
You can't?
Suicide?
There is
Okay.
yeah. She
Content warning. There's death by suicide at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I did not know about her.
I
I
did
mean,
not
it did
know.
happen a very long time ago,
Yeah.
so it's like, but it's not exactly a spoiler.
It's never fun to stumble upon something that might trigger you. So.
That's true.
I was very surprised when I got to the end. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I very rarely is my mouth open at the end of a Wikipedia
Right,
page.
yes.
And the way that it was, I mean, that was A+ storytelling.
Did not see coming.
Yeah.
All right. Star Wars?
Star Wars. I think it's Star Wars. Because space.
I think it's Lord of the
Is it the
Rings.
Clone War?
Because
Did I do it? Okay.
I thought it was Lord of the Rings because I said a band of friends is in search of fresh DNA and they encounter evil on their journey. But I may have to defer to Clone Wars.
Wars.
That's pretty good.
That was
I did a Star Wars.
Oh, that is so good.
Gobsmacked.
That was the best. That's the best one I've heard in a while. It's the Clone Wars, and they're fighting an evil force of Imperial.
Who are guarding the only remaining sperm. Yeah.
A New Hope. Revenge of. No, I'm not going to say.
Okay,
It.
on that note.
What's coming up next? I always
Oh, it's
forget the title
Connie
of it.
Wellis, Last of the Winnebagoes. And
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
And then the Brandon Sanderson one.
Emperor's Soul.
After
Yes.
that.
Yep.
That reminds me of Boy's Soul from It's Always Sunny. Anybody? No.
Nope.
They can cut that.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's it.
No.
Bye.
Goodbye.